Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar on the Workforce Diversity Data Requirements for 2013. My name is mySRA Lalani and I am the Director of Inclusion in the SRA with responsibility for diversity and inclusion, consumer affairs and complaints. I will be presenting the webinar jointly with mySRA, who is a Diversity and Inclusion Officer at the SRA. Our aim for the webinar is to give you information about the workforce diversity requirements and set out the arrangements for 2013. We have published guidance on the workforce diversity requirements, which is available on our website, and this webinar is being delivered in support of the guidance. We will start off the session by giving you a brief summary of the background to the regulatory requirements and the link to Principle 9 to help provide a brief context as to how the requirement can help us and your firm. At this point, I will hand over to my colleague mySRA, who will provide an overview of the new arrangements for 2013, particularly focusing on what has changed for this year and what exactly is required from firms when collecting, reporting and publishing their workforce diversity data. As part of this section, we will take a look at the new online reporting tool which all firms will need to use to report their data through to us. We will then try to address some of the common questions raised in particular by small firms, and will end the webinar by letting you know about the support that is available to all firms when undertaking this exercise. There will be an opportunity for you to ask us questions at the end of our presentation. We will try our best to answer as many of these as is possible. We will put all the questions and our responses on our website after the webinar and would encourage you to look at these. As you may be aware, participation in this webinar event is worth 1 CPD hour. We will provide the CPD authorization code at the end of the webinar, so please do take note of this. So why are we collecting diversity data on the legal workforce, and where has this requirement come from? The Legal Services Act 2007 saw the introduction of a set of regulatory objectives which approved regulators like us, the SRA, are required to uphold and promote. One of these objectives is about our role in encouraging an independent, strong, diverse and effective legal profession. There has also been research which shows that there are still groups within the profession who face barriers in relation to entry, pay and progression. Numerous articles show that some of these groups, such as women and minority ethnic individuals, are not making it to partner levels and also experience disparity in relation to pay. In 2011, the Legal Services Board, which is the oversight regulator for all approved legal services regulators, set out its intention to introduce the workforce diversity requirement for all approved legal regulators, to put in place plans for the collection, reporting and publication of workforce diversity data. The Legal Services Board carried out a public consultation of the requirement. It considered the feedback and reported back to its board, which approved the introduction of the requirement together with a model questionnaire in 2011. The Legal Services Board anticipates that over the years, this requirement will provide more comprehensive information about the makeup of the profession, help to increase transparency about workforce diversity, so that firms and the regulators can measure whether the actions they have been taking to improve diversity are working. They also anticipate that the increase in transparency at firm level will encourage firms to collaborate and put in place strategies to encourage greater diversity in the legal profession and overcome any barriers. Let's now look at how this requirement is linked to Principle 9. The SRA supports the underlying principles set out by the LSB. In 2011, equality and diversity were firmly embedded in the SRA's new Code of Conduct. They were elevated to one of the key mandatory principles introduced as part of our move to outcome-focused regulation. Under Principle 9, there is a requirement for all firms and individuals to encourage equality of opportunity and respect for diversity when running their business or carrying out their role. Under Chapter 2 of the Code of Conduct, a number of outcomes have been set to help them to achieve this. The monitoring of workforce data is one of the indicative behaviors which firms can use to demonstrate their compliance with Principle 9. The LSB requirement is therefore aligned to and supports Principle 9 and should not be seen as something separate that firms have to comply with. There are numerous benefits to collecting diversity data across the profession, both for the SRA and the profession. The exercise should enable us to raise awareness of the barriers that currently exist within the legal profession in relation to both access and career progression. It should also provide us with a comprehensive evidence base of the composition of the legal workforce to inform targeted policy responses. It will provide data that can be used as a benchmark to evaluate the impact and effectiveness of existing diversity initiatives, and it will promote transparency about workforce diversity at entity level for consumers and also for potential employees. In addition to this, it is anticipated that most firms will find the data useful. It can be used to help monitor recruitment policies, and it provides an evidential basis to demonstrate delivery of the equality and diversity outcomes in Chapter 2 of the SRA's Code of Conduct. It makes good business sense for firms to access all the talent available in the marketplace, and a diverse firm will be well equipped to access and serve a diverse community. I hope that the brief introduction I have provided will help you to understand the context within which this requirement has been introduced and how this is aligned to the SRA's regulatory principle. This is therefore a mandatory regulatory requirement for firms to comply with, and we will be taking non-compliance seriously this year. We would like to remind firms of Principle 7 also, which states that firms must comply with their legal and regulatory obligations and deal with their regulators and ombudsmen in an open, timely, and cooperative manner. I am going to hand over now to my colleague Karen Sarai, who will inform you of the changes we have introduced since the requirement was first launched in 2012 and set out the arrangements for 2013.
Thank you, Marinisa. In 2012, the workforce diversity data requirements were introduced to the profession for the first time, and we did our best to try and take the pressure off firms for this first year in a number of ways. Firstly, an online survey was provided to all firms, which they were simply asked to circulate to their workforce. Individual responses across all regulated firms were then collated by SurveyLab on our behalf, and we reported back to firms in December 2012 with their aggregated data. In addition to this, we did not impose the requirement on firms to publish their data. The other key difference is that in 2012, whilst we wrote to those firms that had not responded to the survey, we did not follow this up with enforcement action, as we were aware that the profession needed time to embed this requirement. 9,408 firms participated in the survey, and the response rate for each firm was an average of 42%. The results from last year's survey can be found on our website. We are grateful to those firms who responded to the survey and would like to encourage a higher response in 2013. This year, the approach and arrangements around firm workforce diversity data are different. The main changes are that we won't be offering an online survey for 2013. Instead, firms must make their own arrangements to collect their workforce diversity data. They will also be required to report their aggregated workforce data to the SRA via a special online reporting tool that has been built into mySRA. Finally, firms will be required to publish an anonymous summary of their workforce diversity data. The requirement applies to all firms regulated by the SRA, including sole practices, recognised bodies, and alternative business structures. However, only one set of data is needed to cover firms which are linked to each other. For example, a firm and its corporate partners, or a firm and its trustee or nominee companies. We recognise that this is quite a big change. We have therefore tried to provide as much flexibility as possible around how firms should collect and publish their information, while still providing lots of guidance to help support them through the process. We would also like to reassure firms that despite the changes this year, these requirements will now stay the same for the next 3 years. We will now look at each of the 3 requirements to collect, report and publish individually, and will explain exactly what is expected from firms in relation to each of these 3 areas. Looking firstly at the collection of data. Firms are required to collect the data for everyone in the firm. This includes owners, all legally qualified and non-legally qualified staff, including those on maternity leave or long-term sick leave if they are in contact with the firm during their absence and are willing to participate in the exercise. It also covers any temporary, seconded or other contracted staff and consultants that have been or will be engaged on a contract with the firm for 3 months or longer. The following should not be included in the diversity data collection: those that are engaged in work which has been outsourced to another firm or company, barristers or other experts that have been engaged by the firm on individual matters, and those that are not normally based in England and Wales. The requirements also do not apply to regulated individuals working for in-house practices or other bodies not currently regulated by the SRA. Firms are asked to bear in mind that individuals are not obliged to provide a firm with the diversity data, but we expect that they will be given an opportunity to complete the questionnaire and to self-classify against all of the diversity categories. In order to encourage individuals to respond, it is important that firms explain what they are doing, why they are doing it, and how the firm will benefit from receipt of their data. Reassurance will need to be provided to individuals that they may submit their questionnaire anonymously and that their response will be held confidentially. They may also wish to know what arrangements the firm has for keeping their data secure and who will have access to it. These are all things that firms should be thinking about from the outset. It is important to let individuals know that when they complete the questionnaire, they can choose the option "Prefer not to say" for any questions that they would rather not answer. There is a model questionnaire on our website which firms can download and adapt for their use, which sets out all of the questions and categories that have to be reported to us. There are minor changes to the diversity questions that we are using for 2013 compared to those from last year, and details of these are provided on our website. Firms can ask additional questions of their staff if they wish, although they will need to include all of the questions set out in the model questionnaire and stick to the role categories provided for individuals to select in answer to the questions. This is because the reporting requirements will involve entering aggregated data into mySRA for each of these questions using the set role categories. This will enable the SRA to collate this data consistently across the whole firm population. Once firms have collected their data, they are required to report their aggregated data to the SRA by the 31st of January 2014. A special section has been built on mySRA to allow them to do this, and this was launched in July 2013. Only authorised signatories and organisational contacts are able to view and access this section of mySRA, and they will need to enter the data manually, as there is no provision for files to be uploaded, and we cannot accept individual questionnaires or spreadsheets to enter on the firm's behalf, unless this has been agreed as a specific reasonable adjustment. Firms that have lots of linked entities are only required to provide a single response from the main regulated firm. A user guide to entering the diversity data is available to download, and this guide also helps explain how to link entities to the main firm and how to input the data for each question. The data collected from everyone at the firm will need to be broken down by the role categories set out in the model questionnaire when reporting the aggregated data back to the SRA, so this should be taken into account at the time that firms are collecting their data. We will now take a quick look at the online reporting tool so that you can see what it looks like and where it can be found. In order to input your firm's diversity data, you will need to log into your mySRA account. From the left-hand menu, select My Organisations and select the organisation whose data you intend to enter. This should load up a new drop-down menu, and you will need to select the option Organisation Diversity Data. You will need to be either an authorised signatory or an organisation contact to be able to view or access this option. You will then be presented with a number of tabs. You will need to start by viewing the Organisation Selection tab and adding additional organisations if appropriate, and then complete the Totals tab before proceeding to enter the diversity data. So, looking now at the Organisation Selection tab. Most organisations will enter the diversity data for their organisation only, typically for the head office, which will include any branch offices. However, some organisations are also linked to other regulated entities, for example, a firm and its corporate partners. Because of this, you can link firms together and enter the amalgamated data for them as one single response. If this does not apply to your firm, you would just need to press Save on this screen and proceed to the Totals tab. If you do wish to link your firm to another entity, you will need to have made arrangements to collate your organisation's data with the data from the linked organisation and link that organisation to yours on this screen. By pressing Add, you will be presented with a search function that allows you to enter the SRA ID number of the organisation to be added, or the organisation's name. After you have pressed Search, you will then be able to add the chosen organisation and save this change. You can repeat to add more organisations, and when you are ready to proceed, just press Save and proceed to the Totals tab. You can remove organisations also if this becomes necessary at any point, although you will need to edit the data to reflect any changes. When entering your firm's data for the first time, you will need to enter data in the Totals tab first. The totals should represent the total number of individuals working at the firm, not the total number of responses you have had to the survey. The values entered here will be used to validate the total of individuals you enter on the other screen. When complete, you will need to press Save and proceed to the Employment and Ownership tab. At the bottom of each of the tabs, the system records the name of the person who last pressed Save and the date that the data was last saved. This will help you manage the data update. After the Employment and Ownership tab, you can then continue to input the data for each of the diversity characteristics. There is no formal Submit button at the end of the process, although if you have saved each page and are able to see the data that you have entered, it will have been recorded on our system successfully. In addition to reporting the data to the SRA, firms are also required to publish a summary of their workforce diversity data. As this is the first year that the publishing requirement is being implemented, we have produced a publication framework which provides detailed guidance about what firms need to consider at the point of publishing. This is available on our website. The requirement is that firms will publish an anonymous summary of their workforce data annually at a time that is convenient for them. The diversity categories of sexual orientation and religion or belief are exempt from the publication requirement, although they do still need to be collected by the firm and reported to the SRA. Firms must ensure that they are compliant with the data protection legislation when publishing their data. The publication requirement does not override the data protection legislation, and firms must be careful not to publish data that may identify individuals within their firm. The Information Commissioner's Office website has some useful advice on this, and we have provided details and links to this on our website. Finally, firms must decide how they want to publish their data and when they wish to do so. There is no prescribed format that they need to follow. However, all firms, even large firms, will need to consider how they might mitigate the risk of identification when publishing their data. Firms may wish to consider combining some of the role categories or publishing the data for the whole firm without breaking it down by role category at all. Having looked at each of the collecting, reporting and publishing requirements for 2013, I will now hand you back to Merenisa, who will address some of the concerns that we have received from small firms and let you know about the support that is available to all firms throughout the process.
Thank you, Karen. We recognize that some small firms and sole practitioners may have reservations about whether this exercise will be beneficial for them. However, these firms are an important part of the legal profession, and it would be a real omission if we did not capture the diversity data for this sector as well as for the larger firms. We recognize that there are real issues of confidentiality for small firms, even in collecting the data, but we feel that small firms will be able to manage this sensibly. For many firms, even small firms, an open and honest discussion with staff about the exercise and the purpose behind it can often help the firm clarify its approach to diversity and identify whether there are any issues to consider. We would like to emphasize that this requirement is not going to lead to any quotas being set. It is simply the case that the more information we have, the more accurate a picture we can obtain of the diversity in the legal services arena. We therefore hope that sole practitioners and small firms will encourage their staff to comply and assure them that if they have any concerns, they can contact us, or they can choose the prefer not to say option for each question that they are not comfortable answering, rather than choose not to respond at all. As discussed earlier in the webinar, we consider that there are real benefits to the exercise for all firms, including very small firms. It is already recognized that small firms offer a very unique service to their clients. Participation in the exercise can help build their reputation further, as it helps demonstrate a firm's commitment to equality and diversity, which sends an extremely positive message to potential clients. With regards to the requirement to publish for small firms, we appreciate that there may be a high number of sole practitioners and small firms who feel that they cannot publish their workforce diversity data without the risk of identification. Firms are expected to make their own decision about the risks involved and record their reasons for not publishing data if they decide they can't. Our advice for small firms is to be sensible and proportionate. Think about publishing what you can and leave out what you are concerned about, referring to our publication framework in full before making any decisions. Bearing in mind the impact that these requirements may have on sole practitioners and very small firms, we have worked closely with the sole practitioners group to produce some tailored communications for them and are happy to address any further concerns that they may have around the requirements. So what support is available? Information about the new approach and arrangements for 2013 have been published on our website since April 2013. All firms have also been contacted individually to remind them of the requirement to collect, report, and publish their workforce diversity data, and further reminders will be sent closer to the reporting deadline. We have set up a dedicated mailbox to answer any questions relating to the workforce diversity data requirements. So please do email us at diversity@sra.org.uk if you need any additional information or guidance. Firms may also like to know that a number of companies are offering an outsourcing service for the diversity data collection exercise, which is acceptable by the SRA. The Law Society has developed a tool to help firms collect their diversity data, and more information can be found on their website. Whilst you may decide to hire a third party to collect your firm's diversity data, it is important to bear in mind that only those that are authorized signatories or organization contacts for the firm will be able to input this data via mySRA. We hope that you have found the information provided today helpful. We will now hand it over to you for any questions that you may have about the requirements and the new arrangements for this year. We will try to respond to as many questions as possible during the time remaining, although any questions that we don't respond to today will be posted on our website with our responses within the next few weeks. Okay, we've received the first question from Claire. What changes have been made to the diversity questionnaire for 2013? A few minor changes have been made to the diversity questionnaire for 2013. and most of these have been made to closely align to the questions to the Legal Services Board's model questionnaire. For example, there is no question asking about the type of disability an individual may have. We are not asking about workplace. We have no longer included a separate category for atheists in the religion or belief section. This is now included in the no religion or belief category. There is no longer an option to select grammar school in the question about your education. We have also recently amended the wording of the Chartered Legal Executive role category in the diversity questionnaire in line with the request made to us by the Chartered Institute of Legal Executives. This role category is now described as Chartered Legal Executive Fellow of SILEX, with the note section reading authorized by ILEX Professional Standards. The online reporting tool on mySRA will shortly be updated to reflect this change.
We had this question come through from Alexander. We only have 3 lawyers, so anything we publish regarding the diversity of our staff will almost definitely identify the individual. Why isn't there an exemption from the publication requirement for small firms? It is for the firm to consider the data in accordance with the data protection legislation, and firms are entitled to make a reasoned decision not to publish if an individual might be identified from that publication. We advise that it would be sensible to record this so that you can demonstrate your approach in the event that your firm is contacted by the SRA about this or investigated for any reason. If you decide that you cannot publish some or all of your diversity data, you do not need to apply for any exemption or waiver from the SRA. We will be satisfied that you have complied with the requirements of the diversity data requirements if you have collated and reported the diversity data to us and have considered the data in accordance with the data protection legislation and made a reasoned decision not to publish. You may wish to review the guidance on our website, in particular the publication framework, before making this decision. You do not, however, need to apply for any exemptions or waivers and will not need to report your decision not to publish to the SRA.
We have received a question from Deborah Francis. Can you please confirm for solicitors, RFLs, etc., not based in England and Wales, but branch offices overseas, whether or not they have to complete the questionnaire? This requirement is only for those that are based in England and Wales. Therefore, those solicitors working in overseas branches and RFLs working overseas and not based in England and Wales do not have to complete the questionnaire. We have received another question from Rachel. Who can see the diversity data in the firm once it has been inputted into mySRA? Only the authorized signatories and organization contacts for your firm will be able to view the aggregated data on mySRA once it has been entered. However, if your firm is linked to other organizations, such as corporate partners, trustee, or nominee companies, the authorized signatories and organization contacts for all the linked firms will be able to view the amalgamated data.
Had another question come through from Simon. Where are we supposed to publish the information? It's up to firms to decide how they want to publish the data and when they wish to do so. However, it may be a suggestion that they could publish it on their website.
A question that we've received from Claire. What does the SRA intend to do with the data once it has been reported to you? The SRA will publish a report setting out the diversity profile of the profession, highlighting any key findings or trends emerging as a result of the data collection process. This information will help us to better understand the impact of our work, and inform how we develop our approach to regulation. The data will be aggregated, and it will not be possible to identify a particular firm from the data that we publish. The data collected from the exercise in 2012 is published on our website.
Another question we've received come through from Richard. How do I know that the data has been received by the SRA once it has been submitted? If you have saved each page and are able to see the data that you have entered, it will have been recorded on our system successfully.
A question that we've received from Jamie: on what basis has the SRA made this a regulatory requirement? The requirement on firms to collect, report, and publish diversity data stems from the Legal Services Board's decision document, Increasing Diversity and Social Mobility in the Legal Workforce, Transparency and Evidence, which was published in July 2011. This is in line with the SRA's policy in this area and is reflected in the principles and rules in the handbook. For example, Principle 9, which states you must run your business or carry out your role in the business in a way that encourages equality of opportunity and respect for diversity. The outcomes for equality and diversity are set out in Chapter 2 of the Code of Conduct 2011, and the indicative behaviors in that chapter include firms having a written equality and diversity policy, which is appropriate to the size and nature of the firm and includes the firm's arrangements for workforce diversity monitoring. Principle 7, which states you must comply with your legal and regulatory obligations and deal with your regulators and ombudsmen in an open, timely, and cooperative manner.
Another question we've received is from Henry. What will the SRA do if a firm does not comply with the process? As this is a regulatory requirement, we expect every firm regulated by the SRA to comply. In 2012, we wrote to every firm which did not respond to the diversity survey, although did not take any formal action, as this was the first year that the requirement was introduced. However, we will take non-compliance seriously this year and will follow up non-compliance in the normal way.
Okay, another question that we received from Rachel. Does the requirement cover individual solicitors who work for more than one firm? If the solicitor is providing services to more than one firm, that solicitor will be covered by the survey and should complete a survey for the firm where they undertake the majority of their work. If the solicitor works for a number of firms on an equal basis, they should complete the questionnaire for the firm they have been working for the longest.
This question has come through from Anna. If we realise we have made an error while we are filling in the data on mySRA, can we go back and change it after we have saved that page? Yes, you will be able to go back and change it. You just enter any changes and press save, and the new data will be saved.
We'll take a final question, and the final question comes from Eugene Mulwill-Hill. Can you be more specific as to what constitutes indicative behavior? Indicative behaviors are set out in Chapter 2 of the Code of Conduct that we published on our website. Indicative behaviors are you have an equality policy in place and you have arrangements for diversity monitoring. When a firm wants to demonstrate evidence that they are complying with the outcomes that we've set out, then one of the things that they can demonstrate this by is to look back at the indicative behaviors and give us evidence about how they've actually complied with the outcomes.
Another question we have received is from Rena. What if a person leaves? Do we update mySRA each time it varies? The answer to this is no. You will need to complete the exercise once a year, and we will take a snapshot in February 2014, but you would not need to repeat the process every time that somebody leaves.
Karen, I think that's the final question that we've received. Thank you all for your questions. Can we remind you that you need to comply with the regulatory requirements around the diversity data collection exercise by ensuring that you have inputted the data onto mySRA by 31st of January 2014. Any questions that we were not able to answer during this webinar will be posted and responded to on our website within the next few weeks. This ends the webinar for today. Thank you very much for joining us,